7th, 1941, after having graduated from Huntington High School in June. He was out at Purdue University, and on his way home in their car radio, they heard Pearl Harbor had been bombed. Turned around immediately and went to sign up for the Air Cadet program. And it took a few weeks till they finally contacted him, but he was then inducted, and with that introduction, Carl, you're on.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Bill, thank you for that introduction. I kind of like the 51 too. It's quite an airplane, but I do have some particulars here to get into first. Bill said I was going to Purdue University. Actually, I went to a prep school 1 year before I went to Purdue. And I was at Purdue on December the 7th as a freshman in the engineering school. And I was spending the weekend with my roommate, a man named Jack Stocky, who lived somewhere north of Lafayette, Indiana, in a small farm town. And it was quite a nice weekend. And his father agreed to drive us back to the university. And on our way back to the university, we got it over the car radio that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And that started all kind of flurries and all kind of problems. At the university, in the first place, we were told that we would get a deferment because we were in an engineering school and they needed the engineers. They knew the war was coming. But then as one week went on to another and one semester kind of drained into the next one, we did have to go and sign up for the draft at the local draft center in Lafayette, Indiana. But beyond that, I mean, things seemed to go pretty normal for a while, but we were getting pretty serious news all the time about what was happening and how it was happening. And one thing that was strange at Purdue University, which is a land-grant college, the first and second year male students must take ROTC. That's Reserve Officers Training Corps. And that was compulsory educational type of training because it wasn't grand college. Yeah. So I was in that, and I had my uniform, and I had to polish all the brass buttons in my shoes and go to these meetings and schooling I think it's twice a week. And the unit was an artillery unit. So we had to parade behind the 75 millimeter cannons and polish everything up and look pretty sharp. And I got to thinking about this after Pearl Harbor. I don't think I'm going to go through this war standing behind a 75 millimeter cannon and all the mud and the dirt and everything else. And things got a little different about the second semester I was there, that not every engineer and student was going to be deferred. And they decided they would put it on a basis of your marks, your grades. And my grades were normal. I don't know if they were below or above, but they weren't excellent. And I thought, well, this is just going to get tighter and tighter and tighter, but we're all going to be there. So without any more ado, I decided the best thing I could do would be ride the old Walbars Cannonball up to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and go to a bare field up there, take the exams and the physicals, and see if I couldn't become an Air Force cadet, which I did. And I was accepted. Everything went all right at Bearfield, and I passed the written exams and I passed the physicals. So they said, well, you might as well go home and we'll call you, which I did. I left the university and went back to Huntington, Pennsylvania. And my dad wasn't very happy with me. Naturally, he didn't see any reason why I should be getting in the war. He had been in World War I and wasn't sure that it was a good thing for me to be in World War II, but he finally accepted it. And a couple weeks went by, and I was just sitting around. He said, "Well, if you're going to be home, you might as well get out there in the garden and plant onions." Well, I had to go plant the onions in the spring, and things went along. And one morning, the front doorbell rang, and he rushed down and got it. It was a telegram. I never got to open it. He opened it. And then he came up to the bedroom and says, "Well," he says, "you're going to Nashville, Tennessee." And I said, "Well, thanks." And I rolled over and went back to sleep, and he looked at my mother and said, "Hey, what do you think of that? He's going in the Air Force," and he rolls over and goes back to sleep. And of course, after I give him this news, but that did happen, and that's the way it happened. And so, yeah, it was about the same time I had notification from Altoona, Pennsylvania, to report to their enlistment headquarters and be prepared to ship out, which I did. And they told me not to bring any luggage or anything, just maybe what I had on and so on. And I would go to a classification center and would be completely outfitted with uniforms and anything I needed as far as military service was concerned. Well, that went fine, and I got on an old cattle car. I mean, I guess the Penn of the Railroad was using all types of cars to transport people, mostly, I mean, new troops. So I went to Nashville, Tennessee, to the classification center, and still I was there about a couple weeks, and they got me classified and so on to be an aviation cadet. And from there I went down to Maxwell Army Air Force Base on another cattle car with I don't know how many were in that group. We were called Class of 44A, and that meant from the date that we entered the service that if we didn't get washed out, we would be commissioned second lieutenants and pilots in January, sometime on January the 7th, 1944. It was going to take us that long to get through the training. That was about 9 months. And they also told us that we were going to be an experimental group, in that they never really commissioned anybody or made a pilot in that short a length of time. They usually sent all the candidates for pilot training back to the universities, and they took schooling and they kind of did other jobs at the various universities across the United States. Well, we didn't get any of that. We went right from Nashville right to Maxwell, and there we got into the hazing problem with the upperclassmen. I mean, they pulled these Pullman cars right into that Maxwell Air Force Base, right on the grounds. And there's these little cadets running around with these sewers hanging on their hips, you know, and jumping up and down like a bunch of nincompoops. And they're looking out the window at what they're doing, and we soon found out what they were doing. They herded us out of those cars and made us line up and stick our chest out and fold our hands down tight and start the march. And they marched to the barracks, and the barracks to the warehouses where we had to draw our uniforms and everything from underwear to hats, and got all that stuff lined up. And then we were, of course, lower classmen at Maxwell, so we were hazed. I mean, like they do at West Point. Nothing physical, just a lot of noise. But we had to eat square meals, and we weren't allowed to turn our head one way or the other, and all kind of funny things. But we got through that pretty good shape. Most of us, and we didn't get anybody washed out there, but then within 2 months of that, we were scheduled out of Maxwell to Florida, to Ludwig School of Aeronautics, where we were to fly the PT-17 biplane. That was our first plane in the air. I don't know where it is. Yeah, that's it. And there's a picture of it there on the screen. And I had a pretty good instructor there, and he explained to me what it was. I'd never been in an airplane before, not a little like that anyhow. So I got in, and the instructor sat in the front cockpit, and I would sit in the back seat. And he was a good instructor. He told me what I had to do and how to fly it, and he would turn the thing over to me. And be sure that I made turns properly and I could pull the stick back and climb and do other mediocre things. And finally, after about 10 hours of instruction, and he says, well, you're about ready to solo. So he took me over to one of the big auxiliary fields out of Lauderdale, out of Lakeland, Florida, and set her down on the runway. And he got out and walked over and crawled up on a picnic bench and sat on the table. He said, well, take off. So I had to take the plane out and get out the end of the runway and be sure I was going down or into the wind, and took off and soloed. I got on very well there. I mean, I passed my different tests with the other instructors. My instructor was a civilian by the name of Herb Williams. And he was a damn good instructor. Herb and I were very good friends, and I'll tell you more about Herb later. But I got through there all right. And I was at Lakeland probably 2 months. And then they moved me to, the next stop was going to be to a prior. No, that was let's see, a pre-flight Maxwell. The primary flight training was at Lauderdale. Then I had to go to basic training at Bay Bridge, Georgia. And there I flew a BT-13 or 15. They had two different models. And the BT-15 or 13 was a solid metal aircraft, fixed landing gear. It did have a variable pitch prop on it. It was pretty much as shown. And I had a little instructor there that I think he just graduated maybe 2 classes ahead of me. Rather than sending him on, they kept him as an instructor. And he didn't want to be there. And he was just awful grouchy. And I couldn't seem to do anything right for him. I'd come in and land and get the plane over on the tarmac and pull off all the throttles and the gas levers. And I'd forget to pull the pitch back in low pitch position for, just stationary. And then he'd shoot me out. And then another day I got up in the plane with him and we were going on, and he took off. You had to take off and fly straight and climb to 500 feet before you could make a turn to pull out of the pattern. And the deal there was that once you got to that altitude of 500 feet and you made the turn, you stuck your head out the side of the cockpit to be sure there wasn't anything behind you before you made the turn. Well, I thought I was doing real well when I stuck my head out and my earphones flew off. And I'm visiting on the end of court trying to bring him back in the cockpit. Whereas he's flying, man, he had to hold the stick because I was going to go everything to get the headphones back. And I got it back on, and that didn't please him at all. And more it went, I just thought, boy, I'm going to get worst out here. I'm never going to get any farther than this because this guy just, I just didn't get along. So I got to do something rather fantastic here if I'm going to become an officer or a pilot for the U.S. Army Air Force. So they took us out to this auxiliary field, and 1/3 of the way down the field, they painted a big, wide, solid line right across the runway. And then we had to get in the planes and take off and circle the field, and we got on the base leg, doing 45 degrees from that white line and that runway. We would tilt the throttle and let the plane slowly glide down and make the turn and go in and see how close we could come to that white line with the tail wheel and the landing gear. Set the plane right down, try to straddle that white line. Well, boy, that's pretty tough stuff. So, I don't know how I'm ever going to do this, but I did find out in some of my flying of that airplane that if I could crack that throttle just a hair, not enough that anybody could see it, and let that plane just kind of pull its way into that position. And then when I got about right over that white line, I just struck that thing back and just let it go bounce down. So I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. So I did it. I made 4 perfect landings. I straddled that line every time. And one of my friends, one of the other cadets come running out, and I parked the plane out in the tarmac. He come out and he said, "Boy, you're hot today." And I said, "Why?" He said, "My God, you had 4 perfect landings in that plane." I said, "Well, I needed that." I said, "I'm gonna get worse out. I don't think that instructor's gonna fool with me anymore." Because the colonels and the other people who were judging all the landings thought I could fly pretty good. And I'm sure anything that my instructor told me about me, they weren't gonna believe. So I had no more trouble with that instructor, really. But then I got through that all right, went to advanced training in Marietta, Florida. And I flew the AT-6 there. And it was a beautiful airplane. It was made by the same company that makes the P-51, the North American Aviation. So I flew that and got along pretty well with that and through my indoctrination period. And I flew that and so well and did so well with it. In my last 2 weeks at Marianna, before I was commissioned, they picked me to fly P-40s, what's called P-40 Warhawk, made by Curtis. And it wasn't too far different from the 51. Other than it had an Allison engine on it, and that Allison engine just wouldn't cut it. I mean, anytime it got to 22,000 feet, it didn't have a pressurized ignition system, so the spark, rather than getting down to the spark plug and keeping the engine running, it would short out across the wires onto the engine block, and the engine would stop. And you glide down about 18,000, you get started up again. So that wasn't any good. I flew her for 2 weeks, and I didn't have any trouble with it other than that. And I wasn't going to altitude anyhow in Florida. There wasn't anything up there to see, and I didn't have a lot of oxygen in that plane anyway, although I had to wear a face mask, because that's where my microphone was, in the middle of the face mask. So I got through that pretty good. I got commissioned, and I got my wing. I got home for about a week. Then I went back to Bartow Air Force Base in the middle of Florida, right in the Citrus Grove, and started flying the P-51. And I flew the 51 for maybe 2 months for general. And my old primary instructor, Herb Wilson, he was flying the PT-17s with more cadets. Well, I was only probably 20 miles at Bartow from Lakeland, Florida, where Herb was. So every once in a while, I hope you guys aren't going to get me court-martialed here, but I would take that 51 over and I'd find Herb floating around the sky in this little PT-17, you know. And we'd have a dogfight. Well, I'd get behind him and try to come up on him, and he'd just pull that thing around, and he'd just turn on a dime, and I'd scoot her out in the next county trying to get the 51 turned over. But we had quite a time. A couple of times, I guess a little cadet in the back seat, your eyes start popping out her hair. You get so excited. I used to go see Herb a good bit when I was in Florida. I went over and socialized with him. We used to play checkers every night. And he was the worst checker player I ever saw. I don't think he ever won a game. But he could fly an airplane. So I got through that, and after that I was getting ready. I had to go back to Tallahassee to the classification center after my stint at Bartow, ready for overseas service. So then they put me on a train and sent me to New York City, and I was to be on the first available aircraft for England. Well, New York was clogged in, and I had to report every morning to Broadway 1, where they had an office. And every morning I would report in. And if they say, no, we had no orders today, then I had a day off. I went over to Times Square and here and there and so on. But one big thing came up that worried me. I wasn't allowed to write a letter. I wasn't allowed to send a telegram. I wasn't allowed to talk on the telephone to my parents. Everything was very secret. If you can imagine, this was the 28th of May, and the invasion day was June the 7th. To jump out of England to the continent. So everything was pretty hush-hush. And they wanted pilots. There were 51 pilots in the Steinway in England because they knew their losses were going to be terrible. So I thought, well, gee, somehow I gotta let my mother and dad know I'm leaving the country, you know, I'm real trained and I'm ready to go and I know I'm going, but, so I thought, well, why don't I just walk down to Macy's on Times Square and I'll go and I'll buy a big bottle of Chanel perfume for my mother and I'll just have them mail it to her. That way they'll know that I'm going out of the country. So I did, and they got the message. But then it never cleared up in New York there for about 3 days, so they put me on another plane and sent me down to Washington, D.C. to Washington National Airport, which is now Reagan International. And they herded us out to a big mess hall, and we sat on the tables out there till midnight, and about midnight up comes a big old C-54 4-engine Douglas cargo ship. And they got us all on board, and it was about midnight. And I'll tell you, that was one of the hardest things I had to do, to go out and put my left foot up on that damn stairway and get in that plane. Because I didn't know where we were going to come back. I mean, this was no fun. I mean, this wasn't a game. This was for keeps. So I did. I got out and I got in the plane. There must have been, maybe 20 of us, 25. I can't recall the number of pilots. We were all 51 pilots. And we got in the plane, and well, I'll tell you, look out the windows and see that big Washington Capitol and all the lights on it and everything, and just wondering what's going to happen next. And of course, we gained altitude and left Washington, flew practically up there part of the night, got to Iceland in the morning, got out of the plane in Iceland, went in and was to use bathrooms and had breakfast. And the plane was refueled, and they put some other stuff in the middle of the aircraft. It was just a big open cavity. One of these seats, well, here there were bucket seats on each side of the can or the fuselage, and safety belts. So we come back from having breakfast to crawl back in the plane and fly on to Scotland. Here they had loaded a bunch of ammunition boxes in the middle of the aircraft. I don't know exactly why, and we couldn't fly over probably 15,000 feet. We probably never got over 12,000 feet because we had no oxygen. And the minute you get to 19,000, you're not going to live up there, I mean, without oxygen. I mean, that's where the critical point comes in. So we got airborne and got started, and we had all these comforters that they threw in this plane to keep us warm, and because there wasn't heat in this thing. And did you ever try to lay down at 12,000 feet in an airplane with a comforter wrapped around you, and you're just going trying to get some air? You couldn't go to sleep because it just wasn't that much oxygen there that you could get comfortable. So we got into Prestwick, all right, and it was dark, and everything in the British Isles then, even in Scotland, was all black. I mean, there wasn't a light anywhere. They got this plane down the runway, and its back door opens, and some non-com comes out and says, "Follow me." Well, we all jumped out of the airplane, and hell, couldn't tell where he went. It was so dark, couldn't tell. I had no idea where he went. Well, I was fumbled around out there for a while, and I just saw a pinstripe of light coming through two doors joined, and I thought, well, that must be where I'm supposed to be, and I was in there, and yeah, that's where I was supposed to be, all right. So I got in there, and I think they gave us 3 biscuits and a blanket to go to sleep, or go find a place to sleep. But that's what the English had. You didn't get a full master's or anything in England. You had these things called biscuits. You put 3 of them down on the bed, and then hope you didn't fall between any one of the cracks and try to go to sleep. So I was only there about a day, 2 days, and they put us on one of the little Scottish trains. Well, no, we decided to go up to the officers' mess and get supper. Well, we went up there, and there's some little girl there spoke a very heavy Scottish brogue. She said, it's all, you they wouldn't let us go in and eat. And we were on this old cargo ship. We didn't have our uniforms on, I mean, our dress clothes. It would have been simple to be flying that thing with dress clothes on. But we couldn't go into that officer's mess until we had our dress clothes on. So we had to go to eat in the enlisted men's mess, which was just as good a food. But they were very strict over it. The English kind of had a funny way of fighting the war, you know, with the tea every 3 o'clock and dress uniforms every night for supper. And well, if we went to the movies, you had to stand up and sing "God Save the Queen" before you could, before they'd show the movie. But everything, we knew we were in a strange land. But it was kind of funny, so we got through that all right. We got down to Gox Hill. Things opened up a little bit there because that was an American base. And that was to be classified into the fighter groups, the combat groups. So we got down there, and I don't remember whether I was there a couple of days. It wasn't any more than a couple of days. And so in walks a couple of colonels and says, "All right, and all you new pilots, how many want to go with the 334th group?" So many hands and up and up. Who wants to go to the 355th and the 344th and all these numbers? And we just got, well, we weren't in England more than 24 to 48 hours, and all this group, about 25 of us, well, we didn't know one thing from another. Well, what they were doing, they were picking out the squadrons that had the least fatalities, and the less number of losses, KIAs, that they could figure out to get away through the war that way. So here we are, and finally got down to all the pilots that decided to go to these various these various groups, you know. He said, "All right, the rest of you go to the 4th. Well, the 4th was supposed to be a suicide group. We couldn't get much information because we were just there, but we got talking to some of the other pilots and, "Oh yeah, that's a pretty tough outfit. They use a lot of people there." I thought, boy, what an organization did I get into this time. Well, let me tell you, we got to the 4th, and we were very, very much surprised. The 4th group was on a permanent RAF Eagle base that had been turned over to the American Air Force. But all brick, yellow brick buildings, beautiful officers' quarters, beautiful mess. I had a Batman that took care of all my clothes. A Batman's an English valet. And I had a Batman, I paid him probably £1 a month or £1 a week maybe. He shined all my shoes, he cleaned all my clothes, he made my bed. He built me a fire with charcoal every night in the room that I occupied. It was real living, I'll tell you. I mean, it was beautiful. It wasn't nice and hot like everybody else was in. We had the best of everything. We had a complete theater on the base that had sloping floors and all regular theater-type chairs with arms and so on. We had movies every night. So I wasn't at all disgusted with that base. I mean, they weren't as bad as it all turned out to be, but what it was, see, the English had moved off that base, the RAF, and the Americans took it over. Well, what it was the RAF Eagle Squadron. We had all the American boys that went early into the war, went to Canada, and took all the tests up there, and then were transported directly to England. That's what made up the Eagle Squadron. Well, all these Americans, really, it wasn't anything to do with the RAF, but they had this RAF base. So along comes the Americans, and Pearl Harbor and so on. They all transferred. Our government wanted them to transfer all those men into the American Air Force, which they did. So that's how we ended up on this base with all this stuff. And the base had everything on it. I mean, we had all the big food lockers for all the fighter groups or a lot of the bomber groups that were stationed in East Anglia because we had the capacity to handle all that stored food. So we had the best of everything. We got our check or our choice of anything we wanted in all this food storage. I mean, the white butter and or not the white butter, the white bread and butter, everything was just perfect. I mean, perfect, all first class stuff. So I couldn't think that was so bad, but that's how I got there and what I did. And I saw some of the people looking at the dollar bills and so on there on the table. That's what's called a snorter bill, the American one. And when you flew the North Atlantic, which nobody did back in '44, I mean, the North Atlantic, nobody flew the North Atlantic, particularly in the wintertime. So that was quite a thing to get to Powell. So on that plane, the initial, on May the 25th or 28th, I flew that ship across the North Atlantic. I mean, stopping in Iceland, one stop, and then on to Prospect, which was quite an ideal thing. But then, after getting down for a while, where am I? Did I get to Gawk's Hill yet? Or am I still in Prospect? I'm in Gawk's Hill.
Well, you're from Gawk's Hill, you went to Denver.
Oh, okay. Well, Gawk's Hill, when we got to Gawk's Hill, I was to get father classification, and I'd already been assigned to that's where they assigned me to the 4th Fighter Group. But while being there, I was supposed to get additional indoctrination in escape methods throughout Europe. I was to get training to how to use my rubber dinghy that I set on in the 51 in case I got shot down or had to ditch in the North Sea or in the Channel. And all kind of survival equipment that I would carry. And I didn't get any of that. Because the 28th of May, they wanted me in that fighter group and wanted me in the air to combat the Germans because of the invasion. And of course, we didn't understand what the big rush was, but that's what it was. I mean, it was those reasons. But I didn't get any training, and that kind of showed up real quick when I got on the base and I started flying P-51s. That showed up real quick. But I didn't have all this indoctrination back there. They put me with the colonel. Colonel Robert Donald Blakesley was my first flight. And so they told me where to find him. They said, you take the flight and go out and he'll be sitting at the end of the one where he's waiting for you. Well, I did. And sure enough, there's the colonel sitting with his airplane and the propeller going. And I got beside him. We took all 51's aircraft, we took off in 2 on the runway at a time. Took them off 2 at a time. The head element and the wingman. We could down the runway together, lift off, and the wingman would fly right on with the head element pilot. So but being new in there, I didn't quite understand that, so I got airborne with the colonel. We went over into France somewhere. I started flying combat, I think it was D+3. So the invasion was the 7th, I was flying on the 10th. When I got started and flying and we got over enemy territory, you fly maybe 50 yards away from your leader if you're the wingman. Because one flak burst is going to get you both if you're sitting in there flying tight together. So you spread out. And it's much easier to handle something like that. So, but I didn't know that. And that colonel just called me every name under the book. No, he couldn't get rid of me. And I wasn't going to let him get rid of me. I didn't on the way home. I hadn't been there long enough to even know how to get back. And so I guess he didn't know. Then I didn't have the radio. My radio didn't work. So on the way back, I'm still tucked in real tight against him. He looks over at me and he points to his earphones. I said, I can't hear you. I don't have any. Well, then he understood why he wasn't getting any response. But he never gave me any type of a problem. He never even mentioned it after we got back to base. So well, I started to learn pretty quick from then on. I'll tell you, two of the friends that I went over with on the transport and stopped at Iceland, stopped at Peck, where did I stop? I stopped at Prestwick, and went down to Gox Hill, and everything went all right. But what I'm trying to say is, that I think I had two friends I went over there with. Was a guy named Leon Cole and another little pup named Harry Noon. And they both went up in one of the afternoon combat missions over France on the third day of the invasion, and for some reason they got strafing and got carried away with what they were doing and not where they were. Both of them crashed, and that was the end of both of them. One hit the ground, turned over, then went down, and that was him. The other one hit a tree and bounced off, and he had two 250-pound bombs on his wings, and they exploded. That was the end of him. So that's why I think a lot of people got the idea that the 4th Fighter Group wasn't one that you wanted to join if you're going to have any type of a longevity out of the war. So I lost two of those guys I flew with or went overseas with the first day. That were on this new base. Oh boy, didn't sound too good. But let me see where I'm at here. We're at the 4th Fighter Group, and we've already received the P-51s. One of the first groups to get the 51. Well, on the 51, yeah. Okay. Well, the 51's a beautiful airplane, as I mentioned the bill. And I'll just read you this. Out of the pilot's manual, it says, mastering the P-51, however, takes plenty of hard work. For being a first-rate fighter pilot must not only be a pilot, but a whole crew. It must be the pilot, the navigator, the gunner, the radio operator, and the bombardier, and know how to avoid flak. So you're only one in there, and you got to do everything. I mean, you don't have an extra man there to tell you how to navigate, or an extra guy to fire the guns, or anything like that. So it's pretty much right, exactly how you have to handle that. And the 51 now, of course, as I mentioned, the Allison motor wasn't quite the motor it should have been, because the Rolls-Royce had the 51 Maryland engine, the Rolls-Royce Maryland engine. On takeoff, it produced about 1,400 horsepower. And it had a range with the wing tanks, the big wing tanks that we hung under it, could fly around 2,350 miles without refueling. And it was quite a big jump over the P-47 and the P-38. We could go so much farther in distance. And of course, to do that, we carried 490 gallons of fuel in that little airplane. We had 5 tanks, which meant that gasoline weighed 1.5 tons. That much gasoline, 490 gallons was 1.5 tons weight on that plane. But it did it. We never took off without at least 20 degrees of flap down. And going like hell to get airborne. And it was a little unstable with all that weight and all that gasoline. But it would fly. But the minute we'd run into any trouble in the combat, we would drop some of those tanks as external tanks. But if we didn't have to, we kept them. And of course, you're flying along, you fly probably 30 minutes on the right tank, the external tank, and 30 minutes on the left tank, and back and forth. Actually, you practically drained them. You had no gauges. So when the engine cuts and stops on the first tank, you flick the switch over to the other tank, get it started again. You couldn't tell when you were getting low on the fuel. But that worked pretty well. There was no problem there. And then, of course, the 51 had a Hamilton Standard 4-bladed prop. That prop is 11 feet 2 inches in diameter. And you needed the 4 props, the 4 blades, to absorb that 1,400 horsepower in your flying. Then I had 6 free-firing Browning .5 caliber, 50 caliber machine guns. And I couldn't fire one machine gun; they all went off. I mean, they were set up that all 6 guns would fire at once with a trigger affair on the end of your stick. It looked like a pistol grip. But we had something different that none of the other 51s in the whole European theater did. Because of the old RAF planes that the early Americans had flown over there, which were Spitfires, the Spitfire pushed a button to fire their guns, and they used a trigger to drop their bombs. Well, that was just the absolute opposite of the American aircraft. So all our planes were reversed because of the older pilots, the RAF trained pilots, that we would push the button on top of the pistol grip to fire the guns, and we'd pull the trigger to drop the bombs or drop our gas tank. And this caused some confusion. I tell you, there were some new pilots come in there that forgot to televise. They flew the gas tanks before we even got to the channel. And you pull the trigger instead of pushing the button, and vice versa. So that was pretty bad. But the 50 caliber machine guns, I had 400 rounds in each inboard gun. I had 270 rounds on each middle gun and 270 rounds on the outboard guns in my wing. That's a total of 1,880 rounds of firepower, and this is the shell that we fired. Whoops, we took all the powder out of this one, but that's a 50 caliber bullet, and they have a very unique system. This is what we call an API bullet. It's armor piercing incendiary. In other words, the incendiary part is this is a copper jacket to go through the barrel of the gun. But then inside this copper jacket is a real needle sharp hardened steel bullet. And between this copper jacket and the hardened steel bullet is a coating of phosphorus or some chemical that when this bullet hits anything, it peels the copper off, and the friction from the copper going off, it flashes. It flashes, and that will set anything on fire that's burnable. Even a thatched roof on a building you can set on fire with these things. And that's very handy, really, because there were times when we would go into Germany and we could pick up an old railroad station or something and have maybe 50 gallons of gas left in one of the wing tanks to drop it on. And we would drop the wing tank, splash it all over the building, like a switch tank or something for the railroad. Then back off and hit it with these bullets and set it on fire immediately. So they're just one of the things that we did. And there were other things that got into this. In order to get these things to fire accurately, see, these guns were fixed and set in the wings. You couldn't guide them or change them. They were there. You had to fly the airplane to hit the target. In other words, you had to make sure that airplane was not crabbing or moving into the air other than nose to tail on a perfectly coordinated space. So, oh, there's my gun sight. Yeah, that's come up in a minute. And so, in other words, I can think of one thing. You guys probably all use the garden hose to spray a garden or spray the lawn. And if you take that garden hose and you whip it back and forth, the water goes in a big spray. That's exactly what happens to all these bullets, unless that plane is flying absolutely straight, nose to tail, and not crabbing in the air one way or another. That you have to be absolutely coordinated with what they call a needle and ball instrument on your panel. And then it'll hit right on the money. But if it's the other way, the bullets will just fan and fly all over the place. So, and that was up to the pilot. You have to buy the airplane in order to fire the gun. And my daughter's telling me about this site. This is a K-14A computer type gun sight, which has a gyro motor in it, so that if you're going to do aerial combat and you're chasing a German or anything in a turn or anywhere, this gun sight automatically leads that plane far enough that it'll hit it. When you just put the pip or the little tip on the plane and pull the set of diamonds, the reticule down around to get the distance, the width of it, like probably 37 feet or somewhere in that neighborhood. It'll hit the target right on the money. If the plane is flying properly, though, you got that needle and ball center, and you pull your throttle handle down, which is like a motorcycle, and you put that sight on that airplane, hold it for 1 second, pull the trigger, it'll hit it. It'll hit the plane. No problem at all. But actually, there's 2 sights in there, because the other sight you see was a fixed sight. It didn't have a gyro on it. It was fixed. That was for craving ground targets. And then you would line up the plane and come in and hold that on the target and pull the trigger. If your needle and ball is right, and you could feel that needle and ball. And once you flew that airplane enough, you could feel it in the seat of your pants, whether it was moving through the air right or crabbing one way or another. You could feel it. So you could set her there and make her go, and away she goes. What do it? I'm trying to think here. In my particular setup, well, the gross weight of the P-51 was loaded with what I just told you about. I didn't tell you how much the bullets weighed, but the gross weight of the 51 was 11,000 pounds when it was loaded with its external tanks, its internal tanks, all its ammunition, the oxygen bottles, my weight, and so on. It was a pretty heavy plane. Funny thing is, during the war, the total cost of that plane was $65,000, which is now, if you try to buy a 51, you couldn't get one for $3 million. What they come, if you can find one. That's how expensive the change has been. And as I said earlier here, I totally loved the airplane. I mean, good heavens, it brought me home safely 72 times. I can't complain about it. But I had 4. Actually, I had 5 51. But some of the others went down. I wasn't in any of them, thank God. But it was quite an airplane. No doubt about that. But most of my work was done with the 2nd Bomber Division of the 8th Air Force. We were long-range escort, because we had lost, the 8th Air Force lost something like 400 aircraft about a month and a half prior to D-Day into Germany. So they wanted 51 pilots, and they wanted 51s, and they wanted more coverage for those bombers. Because if you take what we were doing right after D-Day, we were operating with maybe 1,000 bombers, 1,000 bomber raids into Germany. And these bombers would fly in tight formation so they could protect one another with all the guns that they could bring to bear on somebody that tried to get inside those gaggles of aircraft. And it got pretty tough because we were faster than the bombers, so we had to S back and forth over the top of them and stay with them. And we might have 48 fighter aircraft protecting two boxes of these bombers. But you stop and think, and it's probably don't understand that those bombers, each one of those bombers had 10 men in them. And if you take 1,000 bombers, that's 10,000 men floating up there in the air, and that was the prime group in the whole United States. I mean, all those men were probably 20 to 25 years of age, your next generation. So it was got a little scary. And then besides that, there were at least 800 fighter pilots up there trying to protect that group. So it was very important to not lose any bombers if we could possibly help it in any way. But, I think Bill told you I flew 72 missions with the force. What else is on here? Well, we could get probably 48 aircraft off out of England in something like 30 minutes. But I slept in real nice quarters, and I'd have an orderly would come in and wake me maybe 5 in the morning and say, briefing is a so-and-so, get up and get your clothes on and get the briefing to find out where we were going, where the mission was going to go to. But when I got up or when I got awake, when the orderly woke, I could hear the bomber up there circling, trying to form up to get out, get ready to go out that I was going to protect. And I was just getting out of bed. And but you could hear him up there, and we never really tried to rendezvous with the bombers until we got to Belgium and Holland, because they didn't have to worry too much going across the North Sea. There weren't going to be any German anti-aircraft guns out there to shoot at them. So that was a good way to go over the North Sea into Belgium, or go into the North Sea into Holland, and go across there, and then turn right and get down into Germany to drop the bombs. Or, whatever location they were going to hit. That's the way we did it. And then coming back, if there was no enemy activity, once the bombers dropped the bombs, then we were given permission to strafe or look for targets of opportunity. But we had to be 100 miles beyond the last known enemy or friendly forces. We didn't want to run into Patton or somebody who was going like a bat out of hell. And we didn't want to be shooting him up, so we had to be at least 100 miles beyond any place that we knew that our friendly troops had gotten to. So we do that. What's that? Oh, yeah. The weather got pretty bad up there, in the winter months particularly. And my base, I was at Devon. There's my base. The days that I didn't fly combat, I would leave Devon and I would fly up here to Cambridge. And in Cambridge, I'd fly up here to what was known as the Wash. Now that's the North Sea, you see in the dark. But I would fly up to the Wash, and of course that line kind of represents the River Cam. Maybe if you people do much reading, you'll find that the English like to go punting on the Cam around Cambridge. And it's nothing but a little wee muddy stream, really. I think you could get out and walk anywhere. The English used to call it punting on the Cam. And there were lots of bridges and stuff across here, and they'd duck under the bridges, and have their Sunday afternoon outing. But I would go up here. Oh, I'm talking to the microphone. But I would follow the shoreline the whole way around East Anglia, clear down to here to a big landing strip that we kept on the shoreline there called Orphan Nest. And this landing strip was about right in here, was 10,000 feet long and at least 100 yards wide. You can imagine how big it was. I landed my plane on an AT-6 and the one down in the South Shore one day crosswise and never ran out of pavement. They were so big, and they were built that way to get crippled bombers back to England, and I had one, maybe two engines feathered, and that's how they would get back. Well, then, from then on, they would either junk those bombers or repair them, one or the other. But one thing, the weather would get so bad, the fog, but they actually built bonfires along this runway. I mean, on each side of it, to try to lift the fog and to make a bright light that the bombers or me or somebody could get in there and land. It was in trouble and had to land. So it got pretty hairy. I mean, it was pretty dangerous, but it was war, and we had nothing better than these, handle these things on my base. They used to burn thermite, and they always burnt the thermite on the left side of the runway. The land is right at the head of the strip. And we'd come around, we'd see the bright, brilliant thermite burning, and of course it made a lot of white smoke. It was precious worse than fog. And you'd line up on this stuff and keep to the right of all this thermite burning, knowing that if you had your wheels down, your flaps down, you'd probably hit the runway if you just kept going. Well, that worked fine. But then one day, and don't ask me why, hell, they burned the damn thermite on the other side of the runway. And I come around and I got in all right. But I landed in the grass. I mean, I was clear off the runway. And I just kind of eased that thing over, got back on the runway and let it run down and slow down and got off the taxi strip route in the revetment. But I never, to this day, know why they changed their mind and took the thermite from one side of the runway to the other side. It got that way. That's what they did. What I'm trying to explain to you, I lost this big runway down here. I would, on my days off or days that I wasn't in combat, I would fly that coastline clear down to this big runway orphaness. And then on a bad day, I mean, if I got into real heavy fog in Europe, which I did frequently in the winter months, I would have to go on instruments and come out of Europe on instruments and then call in my base in England to give me a fix. We had 3 radio stations along the coastline there, and they would turn their antennas till they got their strongest signal, then they would call into the central base, and each station would give their degrees that they picked me up on, and they would cross those 3 points, and then they would call me and tell me where I was, and then they would give me a barometric pressure reading to let down so that I could get down lower into the fog. If I get down to 100 feet, you couldn't see anything, I could drop another 50 feet. But that barometric pressure was very important, because when I left in the morning, they gave me a barometric pressure reading, but that doesn't mean 5 hours later it's going to be the same. So they would give me an accurate reading, and I'd reset my altimeter, and I'd get down till I could see the water. It might be 50 feet, it might be 30 feet. And I'd see the waves underneath me, and I'd just scoop over and make landfall in England. Find that big orphanous runway, and go right down that runway and keep going west till I would fly, well, missing barn roofs and fence posts and telephone poles. I mean, doing about 270 to 300 miles an hour. We come up pretty fast, I tell you. But I'd go along, I'd pass one set of railroad tracks that ran north and south. I was going due west. And I'd pass that first set of railroad tracks, and I'm on course. So I'd keep going. I'd run into another set of double tracks going north and south. When I saw those double tracks, I'd pull that plane over and up on its wing and start right north on those railroad tracks and follow those railroad tracks until I came up to a hill with a little red schoolhouse on the side of it. When I'd see this little red schoolhouse, I would pull that George arrived in AT-6 one day. He was my crew chief. He was from York, Pennsylvania. George Forst, F-A-R-C-H-T. I don't know if that's a common name in York or not, but that's where George was from, and he kept saying, well, no funny stuff. He says, you won't do anything funny if I go for a ride with you. I said, no, I won't do anything, George. So we'll get the old AT-6 out, and I'll put you in the back seat. We'll just take a nice ride around East Anglia, you know, and get a little bit of air time, see what's going on. I did. I took him a good ride. Of course, in those days, we always made a 360-degree landing pattern. I mean, it was easiest to get the planes in the ground that way. It wasn't anything like downwind leg and base leg and approach, and my God, we've been all day trying to get those airplanes back in the ground, you know, following that standard procedure. So we had a 350-degree type of landing pattern we used. We come in over the end of the runway, maybe, say 50 feet, maybe 30 feet off the ground, and just pull the plane back and pull it up. And we're going up around the circle to lose speed. We'd drop the flaps, drop the wheels, bring her right on down around, skid her right in on the roadway. And that worked pretty well. I mean, because we could take a flight of 4, the first guy would go up, the second, the third, and the fourth, then each one would fan out a little bit and put all 4 planes on the runway practically before the first one pulled off onto the taxi strip. But anyhow, I took George a ride in this AT-6. And I took him a nice ride, and I didn't loop or anything with it. I just took him a ride. So coming in, he's in the back seat, and he's farther back than I am. The centrifugal gravity in here in those planes can get pretty bad. So I goes in and puts that AT-6 down, yanks her back and pulls it up and brings her around and set her down the runway. And George, he's going and he finally comes to, we're rolling down the runway. I blacked him out. All the blood ran out of his head. And he couldn't see anything or feel anything. He was out cold. All that pressure got off of him. And George said, hey! I never got him to go for another ride. That was the end of that. One other interesting. Oh, okay. Well, I got one more thing here. I mean, all right. Yeah, I see. I'm trying to decide here. I don't want you fellows to miss your time to go home tonight and make all your Easter eggs. Color all the Easter eggs for Sunday. I can go on for hours with this stuff. One thing I was going to bring up, I mean, I have a very good friend of mine who lived in Huntington, Pennsylvania. He's an older man than me. He was the merchandise manager for the whole first floor of Gimbel's in Pittsburgh. So he was quite adamant on how to handle buying and selling of all types of commodities. And he got drafted. He wasn't old enough to miss the draft, but he had so much experience. They sent him to the officers training school. You know, I think back in those days they called them 90-day wonders, where they would take people who had good educations and had knowledge of certain things. They would make officers out of them in a very short order. So Russell was his name, Russell McElwee, so he went into this officers training school, and he got to England before I did. So when I got ready to go over, I thought, well, I'm going back to Macy's. I think the same time I bought the perfume, I got a bottle of Scott's VAT 69 that I was going to carry over and give to Russell, which I did. But Russell also had a very unique friend that went through the same officer training school he did at the same time. A guy by the name you guys might remember, Glenn Miller. You ever hear of Glenn Miller? Famous band leader. Well, anyhow, I'd meet Russell in London. I get down to London, get a 48-hour pass. And Russell would get off his base and go down. We'd get into Marble Arch and go to the Mount Royal Hotel there and get a room and have a big time. What's that? What do you call it? Oh, so we got in Marble Arch this one weekend, and I was there first, and then Russ showed up. And we were standing there in the get around the desk there in the lobby, and in comes Glenn Miller. Well, Russell knew Glenn Miller, so he runs over and shakes Glenn's hand and introduces me to Glenn Miller. And the funny thing is that Russell had gotten a credit slip from his commanding officer, whatever base he was on, to buy the liquor for the week or for the month for the base, for the officer's mess. You know. So he went and he got the liquor all right. He had the liquor in the room. And he says to Glenn Moore, Glenn had a couple of his other band members with him. One of them was Ray Everly, and I can't remember the other. There were three of them. So nothing would have it but Glenn come up to the room and have a drink. It was pouring a drink, and I think we polished off 2/3 of the whiskey that they take back to the base. So I don't know how he ever got around that, but he did somehow. But that was about 2 weeks before Glenn Miller disappeared. I'm almost sure whoever tried to fly him to Paris didn't have any idea where Paris was in the first place. Cause I'm sure they went right down the channel and right out in the Atlantic Ocean, ran out of gas, and that was the end of that. But that was funny how Glenn showed up there, and Buzzy, he was pretty worried. We called him Buzzy. He was pretty worried about that. I mean, what he was going to tell the colonel when he got back to the base. But then the other thing I had here that Lynn put on another thing for me is my mid-air collision. I ran into another 51 in one of my climb outs on a mission. The weather was just terrible. You try to go up through all these clouds, and they were pretty dark and black, and I ran into another aircraft. And to this day, I don't know whether I was upside down or whether he was, but somebody was. And I was going to bail out of the thing. I thought, boy, I'm not going to take a chance here. I mean, I didn't have, I was only up about 5,000 to 6,000 feet in the first place. And I pulled on the emergency levers to throw my canopy off, my double canopy. And I pulled those things out and worked them back and forth. And do you think that canopy would come off that airplane? I couldn't get rid of the canopy. So I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And I looked down at the instruments, and everything looked to be running fine. I mean, I couldn't see the instruments all indicated I was straight and level and flat. I mean, going along. So I tried to jettison my wing tanks, and those wing tanks were really heavy. I mean, I think they each had 638 pounds of gasoline, and 638 pounds is the weight of each tank on each wing. And I pulled the salvo levers to get rid of all that gasoline, because I knew that was going to be a problem. And the gasoline on the good wing fell off. It went down. I lost it, got rid of it, but the other one wouldn't come off. So there I am with 14 inches of my wing missing, and this damn big 638 pounds of gasoline hanging in the other wing. I can't get it off. So I looked at it, and I watched my gyro horizon and my other gyroscopic instruments pretty carefully, because in an airplane, if you're in a fog or in a tight spot like that, you can't tell whether you're upside down or right side up. There's no way. And that's what happened to young John Kennedy. He had no idea where he was. He just, boom, that was the end of John. But I got the plane down, got it lined up in the wrong way, got it landed, and I bet I didn't roll 1,000 feet. That other tank fell off. Right in the runway. Well, I'm glad of that, but That was pretty bad. Well, what I'm supposed to show you boys now is probably the whole part that you came to see in the first place was my combat film. And we're going to show you that, but I tend to explain to you, each one of these bullets that hits anything will leave a flash in front of it. And if I'm running out of ammunition, if I'm down to the last 50 bullets in each belt, there'll be 5 tracers that go flying out in front of the plane to tell me that I only have 50 rounds left in that particular gun or guns, which is how it turns out. So, you ready to do that, man? Oh, well, yeah, that she's telling me to. So every time I fired my guns, I had a 16 millimeter movie camera mounted in the root of my left wing, right up almost to the fuselage, just a little round bird hole. And this camera stuck out. Every time I pulled the trigger in the guns, that camera recorded what I shot at. Now I could override the guns. I could turn the guns off, but I couldn't turn the sight and the camera off. In other words, if I wanted to take a picture of one of Hitler's V2s or V1 secret weapons, and I could see them in the ground, I could take pictures of them, take them back, and they would analyze, and we'd try to figure out where they were, and they'd send the British, what do they call that airplane? It was a British fighter.
Typhoon.
Tornado or?
Typhoon.
Typhoon?
Typhoon.
Could have been it. They would send a couple of those over to try to find these sites and blast them or strafe them, you know. Because Churchill didn't like all those V2s hitting on them. I don't blame him. They were terribly big things. I mean, up in 30,000 feet, and gosh, one of those would go up by you, looked like a telephone pole, and it'd just go up and up and up, and they were going to run to heaven. I mean, it never seemed to move over. But they were awful tough things to do anyway, but we couldn't stop them. I mean, you had to get them on the ground. You couldn't do anything else. And that's the way it went. Well, now, Lynn, you read?
Explain how it's dangerous when it's straight an air drum.
Oh, well, yeah, and so I should say how dangerous was to strafe air drums. Well, we did that because we wanted to break the back of the Luftwaffe, which we really did with the bombers and all the fighter aircraft. We started bombing the aircraft manufacturing facilities in Germany and the airfields, and then we'd strafe them. Not many of the aircraft companies, because they were pretty well hidden, but we could strafe the aerodromes and get a lot of the planes that were in revetments and film and set them on fire. And I did get 2 ME-262s on the ground, and I set both of them on fire, but the film's so bad I don't know if they're going to be able to recognize it or not. But it was funny, I only got 3.5 aircraft to my credit, because I think I did better than that, but the way we handled it, when we had to strafe them on the ground, the chances of you, only one pilot out of 48, shooting a plane up and getting credit for it, and there were 3 other guys right behind you shooting at the same airplane. And they weren't going to award all of us an airplane, so they would break it up if they could figure out from the gun film and other things that there were 3 pilots that shot at that same plane, and it might have been totally destroyed. They would give each pilot a 3rd, or a 4th, or maybe a half, depending on how you did it. So it was probably the best way that they could handle it, I mean, without cheating anybody, but it got pretty confusing. The Germans had a different way of doing it. If they shot down a 4-engine bomber, they got 4 credits, 1 for each engine. So, I don't know, but anyhow, would you want to finish that past line? Was that it?
Well, I'll start the plane.
Oh,
We'll have
okay.
to talk about what they see.
That mic comes out.
You know, pull the mic out.
Yeah, but I couldn't for that pointer. we could tell, I guess we can't run this at half speed, can we? Some places we have run it at half speed. What, you know, I don't have the Philharmonic orchestra here to put sound on this. This is no noise. So, you get it, man? You'll notice my marksmanship gets better as this thing goes along. Is that it?
That's combination of all parties.
Oh. I hope so. Enjoying that?
Where were you?
I don't see anything. There comes something. Okay. See the goods wagons down there in the railroad there? Yeah, I don't just wait. And I think there's a railroad train right there somewhere. You can see all the bolts hitting us. They're starting to blow steam. Then he hit the boiler. Another train. You see the there's a goods yard. We worked over all these boxcars and stuff pretty good. You never knew where the ammunition was or when they were going to blow up. Yeah. Huh? What am I heading? They're all railroad cars. Call them in Europe, they're called goods wagons.
It's interesting to see how those APIs flash.
Hmm? Well, that's I'm sure that's Germany. It's really hard to tell. There you can see some of the smoke and some of the stuff that did start to burn. There's a little trigger way up on the corner of the screen here that if it's sticking out, the guns aren't being fired. Huh? Yeah, right there. There's more locomotives, box cars, goods cars. And there's a truck, an army truck, dragging cannon. There's some of the fires that start to burn. And I'm still firing at some of those box cars. I have no idea where some of these shops are. I happened to get this film because I stayed with the squadron and the group until the war was over, and then I went to the film lab, and they just handed this stuff to me because it wasn't secret anymore. But that's my actual gun footage. You blow this up as big as it is, it gets hard to see them. That's all right. Don't. There's the tracers going. I'm getting low on ammunition. No, most of this was after bomber missions, because as I say, we wouldn't go in, too deeply into Germany without doing it. Watch this locomotive go. There's some here, maybe this is it, where we went clear down to Munich to get the MA-262s. And we didn't have any there, the 262. You watch, I think this time you'll see one of them start to burn. But we went clear down there to shoot up these 262s, these jets, because they were 100 miles an hour faster than our aircraft. So we had to get them on the ground. There's one flaming. Anything I got? Should be another one come up here pretty soon. There it goes. That was an airplane I got in the air. I think that was a WWII. But I went into a cloud and my camera wouldn't record it.
Did they give you credit for that?
Yeah. Well, my number 3 man was down under the cloud when I hit that. And he saw it spin down, so he confirmed it.
Are you the lead aircraft in a 4-flight? In this case, you're the person going in?
Yeah. We went in twos. I mean, I'm actually there all alone. I don't know.
Where would your wingman be?
Off straight from something else, I guess.
Sometimes you separate after
Yeah.
you finish your escort.
Doesn't take long to get away from the coast firing. You lose one another real quick.
But these are all for one mission?
No.
Well, they only have one date there, though.
Every time you see a date, another mission.
No. I mean, this strip here, watch. They had a date. Watch, there'll be another date. See here?
Yeah.
Watch. No, the 24th February. Each one was one day. See how many cars? I mean, that's what's amazing.
There's a switch tower in Holland. They set the roof on fire.
But all this activity would always be done after your escort.
Good.
Yeah, that's what they were asking. You go out, you do just do this, or you do this home, way home.
These are canals up in Holland. You see the Dutch canals? And of course the Germans were using these canals and boats, canal boats, to carry all types of contraband. You see the water spraying. There's the 51 that went down, and I saw the pilot run down the road, so I strafed it. The Germans couldn't get it. No, don't think so. You're getting smart.
You didn't get credit for that?
At the end? I'm sure it is.
Captain?
That about does it. I mean, unless I question.
Captain, do you feel that your inline P-51 engine was more vulnerable than the radio P-47s with close ground? Was there more of a risk with that?
No, I mean, the 47 would take a much more punishment than we could ever expect to get out of the 51, because the 51 is very vulnerable because of all the radiators for the coolant underneath it and all the other hydraulic lines that ran through it. I mean, I had a friend of mine flying 47 in the 56 fighter group at Foxton. He flew his 47 back from Europe with 2 cylinders in it. Right off the engine, and he didn't know it until they took the cowling off of it. He said he had no oil pressure, but the thing kept running, so he kept coming.
When you got back to the base, were you debriefed? Is that how did you figure out the location? Did you write it down? I mean, how did you
Yes,
know where
yes.
the target? What?
Yes, we tried to. I mean, well, when we got back to base, the intelligence officer briefed us to where we were and what we did or what we claimed we did.
What amazes me is when you see these reports, and they'll have, they'll have a date, and not just a date, but I mean a time. You guys weren't keeping,
No,
So what, you got back and you just say, okay, yeah, I think it was this time?
yeah. Yeah, we had no other way to control it. Yeah.
Back here.
Captain Brown, sir, did you have any friends or did you meet anybody that flew B-17s with the 8th Air Force? Did you know of anybody?
I knew one bombardier.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, the reason I ask, very few Americans know this. There was a B-17 pilot who finished his 25 missions, and he came back, and he was in one piece, and they said, Major Landry, you're going back to the States in about 3 days. And he said, I'd like to stay and finish. My crew has 9 more missions.
Yeah.
And he stayed, and he finished them. That's when the P-51s jumped in.
Yeah.
He became Coach Tom Landry of the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not a Cowboy fan. I'm not a Texas fan.
Any other questions?
Well, I had one friend that I went through training with, a guy named Bucky Hoffman. And that isn't Bucky's real name. His real name was George M. Hoffman. But he was known as Bucky everywhere. But Bucky flew a C-47, a 2-engine Douglas. And he was involved in towing the gliders into the drop in Holland, and he was also involved in the glider hop across the Rhine. And Bucky, I didn't see, well, I saw Bucky doing the work as he come in these C-47 to my base one day, and we loaded the back end with crew chiefs and took them a ride. 47, and we took them up, and I was sitting in the co-pilot seat, and Bucky says, why'd you fly this thing a while? I said, okay. Well, I got all that wheel, and all the crew chiefs in the back and just started to scream. You don't need ever do that. So I had to back to Bucky. But the funny story about Bucky is, all through our cadet training, Bucky just loved to swim. And if we were in Lakeland, Florida, he would go to find a local swimming pool and go swimming. And no matter where we were, he would go swimming. Wherever we were in some of their places, Bainbridge, Georgia, or maybe Maxwell Field, Bucky would go swimming. So he went in on that Rhine drop. He was dragging a trailer behind him. And I don't know what happened to him. I was on that too, and that's the 2 drops that I was in on. That's the only times I ever carried a P-45 revolver. Was both those times. But Bucky went in, and I didn't see Bucky till after the war. Then and Bucky was telling me some of his experiences, and he said, "Where do you think I came down when I pulled that trailer, across the Rhine and so on and so forth?" I said, "Well, I have no idea, Bucky. Where did you come down?" He says, "Right in the middle of the Rhine River." I said, "Did you get enough swimming room?" He said, "I got enough that time."
Any other questions? Yeah, make it quick.
Captain, you've been pretty modest about the unit you flew with. He probably didn't want to tell you, but the 4th Fighter Group was the most successful one in the 8th Air Force. And the other one that gave it a run for its money was the 56. And they flew P-47s. That colonel he mentioned, that Colonel Don Blakesley, he was one of the most outstanding fighter pilots of World War II. And that you flew with him on your first mission is amazing. What other aces did you fly with? Did you know Kid Hall?
Well, I flew 2 missions with Blakesley. I flew my first mission with Blakesley. Then he came home somewhere several months, and one of his main sayings was that women and fighter pilots don't mix. And he was jumping up and down and trying to get all us young kids, you know, indoctrinated into his way of thinking.
Well, he was a pretty disciplinarian, right?
Oh, he was.
But you knew he got busted in the RAF, right? He had been busted in the RAF.
Well, I didn't know he got
Yeah,
busted.
for having a couple women up in his room.
That's me.
Yeah.
With a mustache.
Yeah.
Are you trying to look like Blakesley there?
No, I was trying to look like Clark Gable. But anyhow, what happened with Blakesley, I flew another mission with Blakesley when he came back with the squadron after leaving the States. And that was the only 2 times I ever flew with Blakesley, but in my group, we had over 84 aces. And that means that each one of those men shot down at least 5 aircraft, and a lot of them shot down more than 10. So
Did
you
you
can
fly any of
imagine.
those shuttle missions to Russia?
Yeah, I didn't get to go on that. I was an alternate. Nobody dropped out, so I didn't get to go. But no, I remember that well. I was on the base when that all took place. But
Did you have your plane named? Did you have a name for your plane?
no, I had four, maybe 5 P-51s, and a lot of guys put names on them. But I think each person that did that, they had to pay the crew chief to do that, and that seemed getting out of hand as far as I was concerned.
Was your plane always QPT?
No, I had QPT, I had QPI, I had QPY, which is on this one. I flew a number of them. Yeah. Well, this big picture here on the floor was made by the crew chief that did all the nose work on the 51s. That's a Staff Sergeant Don Allen. He's very popular even today. He's retired, but he painted that picture.
That's your aircraft.
Yeah, that was the last
Some
one.
of the people maneuvering so they don't have to give it all up.
The microphone. Yeah. What was I going to say? Something? You think that's the end?
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed that.
The lady from the World War II Honor Bus is here, Becky Lacey, and she'd like to say a couple words.
Hello, good evening. For the 4th and probably last time, my students will be taking hopefully 50 to 60 World War II veterans to their memorial on April 24th, which is just in 23 days, my kids tell me. And if you are a World War II veteran and you have not been on Honor Bus, we cordially invite you and welcome you to a totally free day. We feed you breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We have surprises and dignitaries along the way. We have 2 departure points, one on the West Shore, one on the East Shore. And if my partner out here, Gail Potts, she has her hand up, has applications and brochures. If you are a veteran of that era, please join us. If you would like to volunteer to join us as what we call a guardian of a World War II veteran, we need volunteers for that. So please you join us. And like I said, everything is paid for by private donations. It's a deluxe motor coach. We have a hot breakfast. We have an Applebee's lunch. And we have a full course dinner at the American Legion in Dillsburg. All expenses paid. So please, you members of the greatest generation, join us. And this will be our 4th trip. We'll have crossed the 200 barrier. We've taken almost 200 veterans to their memorial since we started this effort about 2.5 years ago. So any questions about Honor Bus? Saturday, April 24, departing from a Harrisburg location and a Mechanicsburg location. Thank you.
Don't forget we have refreshments, and they're passing the steel pot. My Cancun fund is getting low again. And seriously, that pays for the postcards, and when we have to put somebody up over
He just wore black Oxfords. Well, I know the answer to that. It was the glycol from the engines that kept the P-51s warm. But the bombers were the cold. You plugged, there was a place showed in the cockpit, yeah, where you plugged it in, and then there was several places plugged the oxygen in. My sister made it. This is just clippings that my grandparents kept. There's all kinds of stuff in there. Sort of in chronological order. I tried to figure out how it happened. Thank you. I was supposed to be
That was a beautiful
unseen.
sight. I was in the Battle of the Bulge, and whenever I saw those fighters coming over,
Yeah, he's talking about They had white, red, and blue.
I always
So
thought
when you came back, you took it off the
made
board.
it.
My wife and mine had to take it off the board. And you didn't come back.
Sleep, you know, rather than but still, if they were shot forward.
The air medal. Kind of like a Boy Scouts, you know.
Made a DVD of his flights. That alone is so rare to have footage.
Yeah, he had a VHS. First it was a big 6 million. Yeah. Then it went to VHS, and then my brother.
When like
the guy has to have been worn out. Those were put on the show.
guess what?
It used to
Double born, so that's it. I'm a granddad.
You can see it on that side.
My son took
But it was on the
that to
different
school.
shoulders because of the R.
I'd like to get down there and see some. There's a local say honey.
Yeah.
He knows it, Laurie. In January. When did you enter? Check. I don't know if that's what was amazing. But you know what? It was camera awesome. I know, I have a. But he had everything. Oh, I need to actually want to. I just. But they cut it for all of it. I almost lost one. He said that he was in Germany was first.
This is my wife. I'm the son-in-law.
Buttons that are a compass.
Yeah.
And then this one's like a, I don't know, it's got a little dimple on it. Yeah.
Compass, are we going to meet you at your place?
Yeah, I collect those. I have one. Actually, well, it's my brother's. It's one of those that was made out of sterling silver and has a small one.
Thank you.
I understand you two are actually the producers here.
Yes, well, yes.
Congratulations to both of you.
Oh,
You're great.
thank
Very
you.
good.
Well, thank you, but I didn't do anything.
You're the co-producer.
Co-producer. She kept up.
I get the first hit.
Well, yeah, we were in Army.
It's interesting, I was going through my dad's papers and I came through another envelope and here he has stuff of his fathers from World War I. And one of them, I've told you about this, is a handwritten letter to General Hershey from my great grandfather.
Yeah.
I just took that off his new leather jacket this afternoon. You know, my whistle brought his silk scarf down. You know where it is. He didn't know where it is. It's in Mother's drawer. No, I would have brought it. His silk scarf is a match.
Oh, you mean, or you mean the white silk scarf? That was
Like when I do living history events, I do 327 spiders on the tree. And a lot of guys scarves they
Ground like
part of
third.
Oh, okay. That's what you have. Yeah, theirs were made out of white parachutes, and they cast them out.
It's safe. I call it safe.
I guess it was for chafing. I don't know.
They started, they had a conference, and they reversed it. I never seen it.
And they did.
And sure enough,
Those are neat.
he's 429.
Oh, yeah.
I'm studying behind the scenes.
Were you going to write the article for
I think that's who I was sending my box for.
He's starting a website. He said, you can cover this. I can't pay this. That's okay.
Like I couldn't get the
I was a stringer for the Daily News.
Oh, what the heck is a picture? Yeah, exactly.
I still cannot believe that one.
He was a little worried about being able to talk to
I think baseball's easy to follow. I don't know much about
I didn't know it was in the Navy. It was the same way.
Everything else is Is this the one he wore?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the ones.
That's the way so that hung on in case he had to ditch.
In the pictures, that's the same one.
He had this made in London.
These are that and the other one. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Did he polish his wings? Why are they worn?
Do you know he didn't? But, they've been hanging on there for. But he did tell us.
These are usually sterling silver. Are these British made? The gaunt?
Well, the coat was made. And he did say, oh, this is made.
Yeah, he's got the patina. I was telling my son had a great school project to do.
Even the wings there are.
This is what we're going to have.
Yeah, well, you rarely see a warm one. I mean, generally, I guess it's shiny. But I asked him about the blue backs.
My wife's starting on it.
And it's really neat because the way it's normally it's, a rectangular.
It's one of his cloth maps.
Yeah, it's the cloth maps that he carries.
That's some story about him being with
Is that at the Taylor?
A tailor in
Bond Street?
Right.
Great thing is my wife has an organization down there.
Yeah, they're down there.
Does he have this book on the shelf?
You know, he doesn't have that.
Because I found his skills in the other one.
You see the real deal?
Are these all ours, Lynn?
Yeah, the one that's
Yeah, this guy has put this thing together. It saves you from going down to St. Miller.
Okay.
Schiffer, Schiffer, they always have these funky in it, but they're expensive. But they don't change anything. If you submit your they have all the claims in there. Because I have another book on cases and it stops at 4. Here he is, right here. See? And there, remember that one gun camera film is dated this.
Right. He was the one, he couldn't find the one kill in the air.
Here it is. It's a 262.
In his
Right here. No, I'm sorry. FW 190. Destroyed air.
Okay.
December 2nd.
I'm looking at his log. He went all through his logbook today trying to find if that was written in. And he
Well, it's interesting because light pine
yeah.
becomes a U.S. Army base.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I'll have to get him one of these. You know what? I'm going to
It's a 2-volume series, actually, and I forget what the first one is.
really
Yeah, I have
This one.
No, I don't think that's an old one. Well, I have one thing like Borders one day. You know,
Are you a pilot?
everything I have.
No, my eyes were too bad. I went in the Army. My dad was in the Army Air Force, but he was in Italy, North Africa, with the 12th.
My dad's best friend got shot down.
Well, there's the lady that,
But I've researched a lot with the 4th because I'm working on a history of the KG-2
Matt had
which is based primarily on Western Front.
probably, yeah.
Especially if he was attacking airfields in France.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I asked him if he knew about on D-Day, the 4th fighter lost a whole flight. They didn't come back.
I read about that.
Did you?
I read all
I've
about
been
that.
trying to figure out, what German unit might have been. That's what I'm trying to do. Didn't they sign? Wasn't there a dollar bill they would sign?
That's all the pilots, then they cross the Atlantic. The pilots pull them over, and then on the return trip they get it. That's called a short snorter bill.
Yeah, okay. That's a great album.
Hey, man, I want to show you this. This is spooky. This is not your dad. Yeah.
That picture with the mustache?
Yeah.
He looks like Freddie.
That's who it is.
Yeah, but
I saw Blakesley, but it's George Creddy.
Yeah, Blakesley.
yeah, Blakesley.
My dad's unit, and I do the newspaper for
Right.
Division.
I told my
They have
dad
the
about
distinction.
that.
He's the one that Timberwolf shot down.
Oh, I told my dad who it was, and I was like, Dad, the biggest thing, I couldn't remember who it was, so.
Yeah, I'll have to show him.
Were you girls here? Wow, I didn't see you. I was gonna send you.
Watch it, Carl. Your daughters.
You remember that.
All right, I'm gonna haul some stuff down.
This is the one my dad's outfit shot down. They shot down George Creddy.
Did ya?
104th Division.
No boy.
Timberwolf. Christmas Day, 44. He bounced 2 Falcon 190s. He shot one down. The other one went down on the deck. And it was just flying. No, he was keeping right on the deck. He came up over the 104th Division with attached anti-aircraft artillery with quad 50s on a half track. They saw the Falk-Wolf. They got him. And here came the Mustang, and they stopped. One shell. One hit the plane and hit him. And he did go up to bail out. He never made it. No, they're not too proud of that.
Air Force War Diary. You know that?
Thanks so much.
Freeman, you probably heard of Freeman. He's like the British. He's a Brit. He was like the
When did I hear a change of plans?
And this was old mission. December 2nd, they couldn't get the W190. See, you said you usually flew the second bomb.
I didn't say anything. I had nothing to do with it.
So many guys like that.
I just go with the flow and tell him what to do.
Hey, this was
Oh, he was so excited to do it, and he was giving him for 2 visits to go, because I've done a lot of research.
What a story he has to
I mean,
tell.
I assume there's a date here that all those.
It's interesting for me to go back and to really put the pieces together, because he never really had been
Well, they should be.
Yeah, but I mean,
The camera should be changed every
No, but I
day.
have all the notes.
Yeah.
That's something I'm considering.
Like it to be written up.
it seems like
Maybe, yeah.
how many
Have you seen
targets
the
did you take
magazine
on? That was amazing.
Well, I'm not sure that John's right, but whoever put that stuff together might have eliminated
I'm
a
just
lot of
amazed at the number of the websites and stuff. You know, I grew up knowing he was a pilot. I grew up knowing that the medals were in the den. You know,
I was
it was
surprised
just
you had that
another
much
part of
ammo.
the
That's what it
house.
was.
You know what I mean?
We only had
So it
1,800 in the
wasn't
ground.
like in the last maybe 15 years.
You
It's
could
become
on
a
your
good
straight.
subject. You know, he
When
talks
did you?
about
The
people.
dangerous thing was getting fixed on your target,
I
not
think
pulling
it's
out
when
so much,
Alex,
right?
my son, did
You have your
You got
sights.
hypnotized and he pulled out.
I did.
So how
I
did you avoid that?
hours of tape of him sitting talking to Alex. The whole time, I mean, I'm going behind the camera one.
No, I mean, how did you?
Like, he never
Did
told
you
us
have
any
something?
of this stuff, and he's
Did you have
telling
something
Alex all
set
these
up
stories.
that
At least, you know, it's out. You know. And then it's kind of climbed, and then Alex started doing his VFW.
In the like that tell you,
So.
okay, you just had to.
It's like we never, like I
Get
knew,
it.
we always go to my grandma's house.
But at what point did your bullets converge?
Keep hats on and stuff, and we found out it was actually, we always thought it was my grandma Hawkins who was in Korea. And then we realized, and then we learned that it was actually her father who fought 3 wars.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you. Yeah.
He was in the Spanish-American War,
Wow.
Filipino-American War, and World War I. And it was all his stuff, all his VFW stuff from like the 20s that we were playing with.
Isn't it amazing though it's in an attic?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Surprisingly, guys came back from World War II and just threw it all away. They wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
You know what? I think that's what happened. I think my dad came home, had the stuff in boxes or here and there in between his parents' house and all. And then later decided it was, you know, maybe something to talk about.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get him to
They did tell me that everybody was so tired of war by the time it was over that nobody wanted to talk. You know what I mean? When you got home, the civilians didn't want to talk about it either.
Yep.
And that's understandable.
That one's been censored.
Yep.
And have their own. See, the Germans would do that.
I don't know anybody that
Germans didn't have, as many.
Oh, I know what the other thing was.
Is this your, is this the famous?
One coat, I don't believe it was award.
What do you think, Daniel?
Nice stuff.
The battle jacket with the red line.
Good speaker.
No, it's down yourself.
No, I just wore it for.
T2 with
Yeah, hey, I didn't fly. See those big heavy boots down there?
Yeah.
They were, I bought those at Harrods in London.
Are those the RAF things?
Well, yeah, they're regular.
Did you know Frank Spear?
Yeah.
Did you see him day to day at all during your?
No, I saw him at Reading.
I think he was dead. He was a POW by the time you were in the force.
He was PW back Monday months before I got there.
Did you get it?
You know.
Well, he was only
He actually met him in an air show.
Yeah, I meant I just want to carry.
This has his mission, you know,
Oh, the list of his.
all the missions that they've had.
Oh, okay. You made that frame.
The name in the back?
I made it put that.
Because I always got mine. Oftentimes, after I left the
There's an air hillbilly.
It takes so long.
December ago, and he's always at Reading. Called me this past week.
And there's
All 6 major campaigns in the European theater.
Did you fly up till D-Day?
Yeah. I quit in February.
I know, and I just wanted to carry that down here with the others.
Back to the States. I came back to the station to Queen Mary on the 4th of
Just let him like that. I brought him over just like that.
You got that. Are these the ones that you were awarded?
Lynn, is this ours?
I want to show you that.
Is this ours?
I mean, that was, yeah.
I think that guy.
Everybody thinks right there.
Hey, Tom, is this yours?
Yeah.
I never flew them. Well, guess why?
You gotta get out of them?
No, they were warm, they were comfortable, they were very good, but what the hell tried to try to figure out? I'd be running around my bare feet. I always throw the GIC down and blow it pretty tight. I loved it. I played locally in England with those on. I didn't wear these. Yep.
Yeah, I gotta read that.
Did you stay in the Air Force?
Yeah, I'm retired or.
In the Air Force, yeah, the ones things here down.
I want you to hand it to me. Did you fly 51? Ready?
Did you want?
I got them, thank you.
Well, I wasn't going to go to Pittsburgh
Done it. Combat, right?
Yes, I can't believe you did it.
He's always got this. Well, you were at Purdue when the war broke out? I missed the beginning. Did you? They put you in an aviation cadet program? Did they let you stay there and get more credits?
No. Well, they offered me a deferment between the engineering school. Yeah, but as the war got bigger and so on, then they decided my grades had to be a certain level before I could get the deferment. And I had that, but then I was this one.
Oh, yeah.
I won't be deferred at all. They were trying to get
I had an ASTP program. Yeah, ASTP.
What's that?
That's for guys like you know, that were qualified for college.
Do believe.
The Army sent them in engineering and scientific fields because they figured they were going to need all these technicians and scientists. But then after D-Day, they realized, well, YouTube is all would win this war.
No, your place. Okay, we'll see you. Take care. No, it's okay. Do you do this for Bill or?
Yeah, I do it, Bill.